brings transparency and accountability to tax policy. It ensures Social Security and Medicare funding, closes all loopholes, and brings fairness to taxation. It also abolishes the IRS. I would say that there are two broad areas that the fair tax has benefits in. I tend to think of it in terms of economic stimulus and political reform. The fair tax addresses a whole broad range of adverse economic trends that the current system exacerbates. Included in those is an enormous trade deficit, the spiral of complexity and higher compliance costs that we have in this nation, and a number of others. The political reform, I've come to believe, is just about as important as the economic stimulus that it would provide, because Washington has become just teeming with lobbyists, and a big part of their job is to exchange campaign cash for tax preferences, and the code has become so overgrown and so burdensome that nobody can understand it as a result of it. And so in order to clean up Washington, the currency that's used to pay for the enormous amounts of cash that has to be raised for congressional campaigns has to be addressed, and the fair tax is the simplest and easiest way to do that. So I could say a lot more, but I know you want to have questions, Governor, so I'll just stop there.
That was terrific. So we'll continue with questions. Dave, you're up.
Hey, thank you, Governor. I read about you on the 420 Times website the other day, so we're big supporters of you. I had a question about home loan interest deductions. Does that still happen under your fair tax plan?
No, that's gone. That's gone. All any deduction. Look, you're not going to pay income tax anymore. You're not going to pay no withholdings from your payroll check. That all comes out of the fair tax. So these are the loan interest is one of those, if you want to call it the biggest loophole that exists available to everyone. You're laughing. What's your criticism?
No, the biggest loophole. You know, it is kind of a scam in a way. That it's jacking up the prices of homes, being able to deduct them, I would imagine.
There is, I think, a misconception.
Phil, I would love you to chime in.
Let me jump in here, Governor. There is a misconception that the reason that people buy homes and the reason they give to charities is because of tax benefits. That's just a myth. The fair tax would have a number of other very beneficial impacts on home purchases. For example, interest rates would go down by between 25 and 33%. People would be having their entire paychecks, and the biggest barrier to most people moving into a new home is saving up enough money to get into that to afford the down payment. And so in a fair tax world, it is a paradigm shift. People would have to think in different terms, but the home construction industry would do extremely well under the fair tax.
All right.
You know, you don't need a deduction when you get to keep all the money that you make. You're getting to keep all the money that you make. You don't need a deduction from being able to keep all the money that you earn.
All right. Thank you, Governor, and keep pounding away to try and get into these debates. You know, we're really rooting for you out here.
Great. Thanks, Brian. Thanks, Dave. Will Johnson.
Thanks, Governor Johnson. My question is has to do with how is tax actually collected? If I'm earning $4,000 a month, where am I paying taxes?
You're paying taxes on every time you consume any new goods and services. That will be 23%, but the belief is that embedded in all goods and services now is basically a 23% tax. I go back to the example of a Coca-Cola. That if a Coca-Cola costs $1 today, 23 cents of that Coca-Cola is tax. Enact the fair tax, Coca-Cola company is no longer going to have to sell that Coke at $1. They're going to be able to sell it at 79 cents to make the same amount of money. So the notion is that over a very short amount of time, the fair tax actually ends up being cost neutral to what we're currently paying. It makes American goods and services much more competitive on a global basis. And Phil, you are welcome to chime in anytime you want as our resident
you hit on a
expert
very
here
big
on the
benefit
fair
there.
tax.
It's the global competitiveness. And somebody asked earlier about the difference between the fair tax and the flat tax. This is an area where the fair tax has it hands down over the flat tax, because we are the only one of 30 OECD nations that has no border adjustment element in our tax system. And
OECD?
Development, I think, is what it's the 30 largest economies in the world. And we're the only one of the 30 OECD nations with no border adjustment element in our tax system. What that means is we have no way of relieving our tax burden on our exports, and we do not, because of all the trade agreements we've entered into over the last 10 or 20 years, we do not tax, for the most part, imports as they arrive on our shores. So we're at a huge disadvantage against most of our trading partners who have VAT systems in place, and one of the salient features of a VAT is that it removes the tax burden on exports. There's a mechanism where you can apply for a credit on the for the goods that you ship out of the country in just about every VAT nation. So we're at a huge disadvantage in the global economy. As we all know, globalization is sweeping the planet. It is the mega force of the 21st century, and the people who've studied that say that it will be what we've seen so far is just the tip of the iceberg. It will change everything in a profound way. And we right now have one of the worst tax systems on the planet from a global competitiveness standpoint. The fair tax would move us into first place.
Thank you, Philip. Go on to the next question. Willard.
Yeah, I was wanting to know who can abolish the IRS. Does it take a congressional approval, or can it be done by the president? How does that work? And what's the timeline for doing so?
Well, I'll get Philip to also concur with this, but contained in the fair tax legislation is abolishment of the IRS. It also repeals the 16th
It repeals
Amendment,
Internal Revenue Code,
which allows for
and it
the
also
collection of
abolishes
income
the IRS over a period of time. Now, we believe that'll take about 5 years, because the IRS will still.
Okay, so
the IRS works in retrospect. In other words, the IRS right now is working on tax years 2010, 2009, so on and so forth. And it will take several years to wind down the work that they're doing from the period before the fair tax is implemented. But we think within 5 years the IRS will be completely gone.
Okay, thank you.
Next question. Bill Herman. Okay, can't hear you, Bill, but I do have your question here. Is there a fair tax on buying a home? Phil, I'll get you to concur on this, but fair tax applies to new housing, but not resale of existing homes. And Phil, for resale of existing homes, the fair tax does not apply.
That's correct.
Thank you. Erebus.
Hello. I was suggested to you by Donna Rowe of Youth at Transition in Albuquerque, New Mexico. I've been following your campaign, and I have to say that you're definitely the one that I'm going to vote for. My question stems from the fact of keeping jobs in the USA and taxing jobs sent overseas. And now, does the fair tax policy follow that?
The fair tax is really going to reboot the American economy. If in a zero corporate tax rate environment, the private sector does not create tens of millions of jobs in this country, nothing else will. I mean, this is really the reboot of the American economy for the next 100 years. I mean, this is really an exciting notion. other countries are going to have to follow.
Okay, that sounds great. I just, I've always heard from people, about doing that, and from what I'm hearing from you now, I mean, this is sounding very exciting.
It is very exciting. It really is exciting.
Thank you, Governor Johnson. I appreciate your time.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Lee, you're up. Lee goes it.
Hi.
Yeah.
How are you?
Yeah, good. Thank you.
I want to ask you if you become president, will you really legalize marijuana and industrial hemp? It seems millions of jobs and tax revenues would be created if this were to happen. And I'm hoping you are the candidate that finally has the courage to do so.
Well, I'm making a couple promises. One is to submit a balanced budget to Congress. I think that would be the American people shouting, "We want a balanced budget." I'm promising to veto expenditures that exceed revenue. I think that's shouting that we really do want restraint in spending. I'm promising to advocate on the part of the fair tax. I think that's the American people saying, "We want the fair tax." And among other things, I advocate legalizing marijuana. I think that's the American people shouting that they want reform when it comes to drugs. And yes, I think that legalizing marijuana, putting that economy above board, subjecting it to the fair tax, will create $10 billion. That would be the national tax on marijuana. It would be subject to the fair tax. States would be left, another point that we've kind of left out, state taxes remain in place. So states still have the power to implement whatever taxes they deem necessary as exists today. So property tax, I dare say, is still going to exist, and perhaps state income tax, but I'll go so far as to think that states will refrain from income tax because so much of state income tax policy mirrors federal tax policy and the reporting that goes along with federal tax policy. Bill, you want to add to that? You don't have to answer the marijuana part of it, but Lee, thank you very much. Mohammed.
Oh, hello, Governor. How are you?
Great, thank you.
I have a question for people who would like to join your campaign and help up with either the technical stuff such as the internet and advertisement online, or with helping with economic debates and issues like that. How can we join?
Well, I really appreciate the offer. Let me tell you right now that we're just slammed with offers such as yourself, and I very much appreciate that. Right now, we're being outspent at least 100 to 1 by a number of the candidates that are running for this office. So it's a chicken and egg thing. We're being slammed gratefully with offers such as yourself, and we're unable to have the resources to be able to tap what you're offering. So more than anything, this is about exceeding expectation, doing well in the polls. And of course, you can't do well in the polls if you're not even in the polls. So these are the things that I need you to work on, if you would, which is lobbying polling organizations to ask them just to include my name in the polls. And then money is, I'm afraid, so much of this equation. It's the reality that if you have money, you can actually get more name familiarity, and we've got a lot of expertise on how to raise name familiarity and be able to garner votes from just having a little bit of money to spend on advertising, which in essence simply shines a light on what it is that I'm saying and doing. So thank you very much.
I was wondering, because I'm also a Ron Paul supporter as well, and was wondering, do you have any plans to join him in the near future?
I think that Ron Paul has said that if he were the nominee, that he would be appointing a vice president that would be a pro-life candidate, and I fundamentally believe that it's a woman's right to choose, and so I don't think Ron Paul is going to want me to join up with him.
I see. Well, thank you very much.